Hello, everybody. Happy Friday and welcome to the VML. My name's Haiyue. I'm here with the fantastic Filipa Carola. And we are, of course, sponsored by Wizards of the Coast. Filipa, it's week 6. Can you believe it already?
No, I cannot believe it. It feels like we started with week 1 yesterday.
Yeah, I know we say this every season, but this one really feels like it's flown by. But yes, we are in week number 6 of season 11 of the VML. I'm going to try and say the right number because there have been so many seasons. And we are playing standard on MTG Arena as usual. For those of you who are maybe joining us for the first time or not so familiar with the VML, we are a league for people of marginalized genders. We have 128 players each season. They get split up into 16 divisions of 8. And for the first 7 weeks, and we're in week number 6 now, for the first 7 weeks, they all play each other in a round robin format. After that, we take a top cut. So I think we take the top 2 from each division plus 16 wildcards who are going to be the top finishers who didn't make the top 2 of their divisions. And we're going to take all the top 32 and they're going to play single elimination right down to crown a champion. But for now, we're still in week 6, which Filipa is quite a key time for players in the league.
Yeah, I'm playing the league myself, and I'll tell you, this is the time that players start counting the points and thinking this is the win and in. And we are starting so close to this part. We need to win these games to make it in the top 2, or praying that we end up being one of the wild cards.
Yeah, for sure. And, across the 16 divisions, there's going to be quite a split of standings, right? Because in some divisions, you have people who are X and O, and, there's quite a clear top 2. But in other divisions, it can be a lot more chaotic, believe it.
Yeah, for sure. You have divisions where things are very split. Players have very similar scores, but then you have those where you have 3 players with 5 wins, and sometimes 5 and 2 doesn't make it to the top 2. So I think it's where these wild cards are really important to also give something to these players that did so well in the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the wildcard system is something we had like way back in the day, and then last year, for various reasons, we doubled the size of the league, and we kind of thought, okay, let's take away the wildcard system, keep the top 16 kind of tight. But I think after the feedback from everybody, like bringing the wildcard system back, I think was definitely the right choice to make this year. So I'm pretty happy that we could do that for the players. And Filipa, it's standard. Honestly, what do you think about the format so far, having played 6 weeks of the VML?
I think the format is like we haven't seen it in a while because no rotation last year means that cards are staying longer in the format. Decks are very, very strong. And I think what we are seeing is that each set enriches some of the decks that already exist. So Esper Legends has been good for like 2 years now, but we see it constantly adapt to the meta. And then sometimes some decks surge, like the Boros Convoke, that gain very good cards in the murder set and shine through. So it's really nice to see a lot of different decks and a lot of strong cards as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think standard is just in such a sweet spot right now. Last weekend we had the Birds of Paradise Open that you and I were both involved in coverage of, and just getting to see even quite a lot of brews at this stage of a standard format doing well. And of course, we had CFT Sock completely break everything with 68 card slog a couple of weekends ago in Chicago. So definitely a very, very exciting time for standard. Exciting to have standard coming up as the next Pro Tour format as well. And we will see how our players are doing. And I think with that, we can have a look at the metagame for this week. Speaking of standard, 18 players on Azorius Control and Esper Midrange. So it looks like the blue-white decks, Filipa, are kind of rising to the top of the metagame here.
Yeah, I am not surprised. The No More Lies was a great card that was added to the Azorius Control with this new set. We also have a card that feels like it entered right through in some of these decks, the temporary lockdown main, because of so many Boros Convoke, which we see is the second most played deck. So it's fun to see that we do have a good split of mid-range, control, and also aggro decks.
Yeah, it's really great. Love to see Boros Convoke doing well. Love to see lots of 5 color ramp, and also love to see that this other section, 20 other singleton decks in the format. So plenty of creativity out there, plenty of cool stuff. And I think we have a lot to look forward to this evening. All right. I think we can have a look at our first feature match of the evening coming up. On the first side of the battlefield, we have Harper Wilson, and Harper is from Division 14, so that's where we are for this particular match. And they have brought Azorius Control. Filipa, what do you think of this build?
Well, I think it's very well positioned against aggro decks because look at those four temporary lockdown main. We also have four
Mm.
Sunfalls and one Farewell. So lots of removal in this deck and lots of board wipes as well. This feels well prepared against aggro, so I'm not sure if Harper made a decision based on the opponent's previous week, because when you get to week 6 you can do that. You can just see what your opponent have been playing and might see that the opponent was playing a lot of aggro and decided to bring these full on prepared list for the tournament here.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And actually, Harper makes some reference to that, right? She told us, you know, Dreams of Steel and Oil, interesting, it was the card that impacted her play the most so far because every week she has to consider whether or not the risk of her opponent being on anti-Gurk tech is too high. And I think that's hilarious. And also just such a unique VML experience that we've all had from time to time.
Yeah, definitely very fun to see our answers here from the players in this questionnaire.
All right, let's have a look at the other side of the battlefield. And on the other side, we do have Boros Convoke in the hands of Maeve. And Maeve here with a pretty classic build of the Convoke deck. And I think they're thinking it might be like a bit of a difficult matchup for them.
I'm sure they might be expecting this rough matchup, but the truth is that this Boros Convoke deck does have some opening ends. They are just almost unbeatable. You have the option to also rebuild your board, which is really strong. So even though the Azorius Control does have the advantage in terms of having a lot of answers against this Boros Convoke deck, a good thing on these Boros Convoke that other aggro decks don't really have is the resilience, is being able to get an early Knight of Errands and just get more cards into end. Also, there's addition of also new cards from the set, and I'm excited to see how it plays out. Having four Novice Inspectors and now having one more way to make an artifact turn one is really key to make this Gleeful Demolition even more reliable.
That's a great point, actually. I was just thinking, Novice Inspector, everyone loved Raven Inspector back in the day. Love to see it back again. But the fact that it makes the artifact for the demolition is actually a great point that I had not even thought of. And Imodane's Recruiter, of course, terrifying when it hits the battlefield. And we'll see whether Maeve gets to do that against this Azorius control deck or whether it's going to be Harper that comes out on top with the 4 copies of Temporary Lockdown. Let's go down to the action now. Our first feature match of the evening. And we're going to be watching from Harper's perspective. And that's going to be a keep. What do you think of this hand here for Harper?
Well, the Deuce is a really good card because it does allow you to draw two. But if Maeve does have an explosive start, then this is not good enough. The surveil lens also do help, and are another reason that here maybe Harper decided to keep. And also being on the plate does give you an advantage.
Hmm, that does make sense. Harper does find a piece of removal in the form of March of Otherworldly Light. So that could answer the Warden of the Inner Sky that we see Maeve play out. But Harper's going to hold on to it for now with the deduce up as well.
And just going right away, um, A lot of options. I really like that this deck that Harper is playing, the blue-white control, it does have so many ways that you can interact with creatures.
Right. There's a lot of stuff going on there. There's 3 copies of Get Lost, as well as the counter spells, the marches, all of those sweepers that you were talking about earlier on. But ultimately, Harper's going to let this reinforcements resolve. The Warden gets to do its scry thing, and those are just some more lands off the top for Harper.
Yeah, definitely not great top decks here from Harper. Harper needs a temporary lockdown in this situation because things are getting more and more difficult, and those board wipes are necessary. Although Harper does have answers for single threats with Wandering Emperor or March, as you said before, uh, she does not have answers for this full board that is developing.
Right. And this kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, Filipa, where sure, you can pick off some of these creatures one by one, but sometimes the Convoke deck, they just put so many 1/1s, so many small things out on the battlefield. You do need a mass removal effect. And let's see what Harper finds. Oh, and there's a Gleeful Demolition.
Yeah, that's definitely a great card, and I like that they are just saying, "Okay, this is my full board. Do you have the temporary lockdown or not? I'm going to make you use it."
Yeah, and I think Maeve will be very, very happy to get to untap, knowing that Harper has those 4 copies of the lockdown and getting to kind of escape from that fate, at least for now. Knight Errant of Eos comes down. Let's see what Maeve finds.
Not only Knight Errant, but Knight Errant with full potential, tapping 5 creatures, allowing 3 mana open, which is exactly enough to pay for No More Lies. So great play here.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. Those are some good hits.
They're very good hits here. I mean, another knight is perfect. That's the refill effect of this deck. So even if Harper is able to now deploy something like a temporary lockdown, there's more where all this came from.
Yeah, another copy of Knight and the Sanguine Evangelist. You know, there aren't that many mass pump effects in this deck, but when they happen, it's devastating.
That's for sure. And I'm sure Harper here really, really hoping to see one of the board wipes on top. At this point, it could even be a Sunfall, but we have temporary lockdown does not take care of the knight, still does help removing a bit of the board.
Yeah, Harper, very pleased to see that. Lockdown comes down, all of those tokens go away. It's just the resolute reinforcements underneath. And Maeve left with just that Knight Errant of Eos on board. Now, for these Boros decks, Filipa, how do they manage this need to attack and get in and get their opponent down in life total, like traditional aggro decks do, plus this need to save these creatures for these convoke effects?
Yeah, so that's a good point. I think it really depends on if you think your opponent does have a board wipe. It is really tricky to know when to commit, when you need to go and be more aggressive, or when you need to go and find for more answers. And we see here Harper being very careful, not deploying that Sunfall that could just take care of everything and being like, okay, I'm going to wait for them to commit more to the board because there's life total available. That can also signal that okay, so they do not have Sunfall, so I'm going to try to
Mhm.
commit, and that's where patience is so key in this Azorius Control deck.
Yeah, I love playing a little bit of control myself, but the it is so tough sometimes because I've also definitely been in scenarios where I've been too greedy, right? And I'm saying, okay, I can take some damage, I can wait on this sweeper, and then you're sitting there with like 7 life thinking, how did this happen? But Harper managing it very well so far.
Definitely managing very well, still always keeping enough cards in hand to at the same time not be enough of a threat for the opponent to have to deploy things. So it's been very well played by both players. And I could not be on Harper's seat, to be honest. I would be deploying things right away because control is such a difficult deck to play.
Yeah, and it's also funny because when you watch the players who are great, the great control players of Magic's history, sometimes you watch them and you just think, wow, like they're just not doing anything. Like they're just not taking game actions at all, and then somehow they win. And that's one of my favorite things. Here comes the Sunfall now for Harper, though. That Gleeful Demolition is going to draw out the super effect. And Harper's going to pass back no more lies available, plus the Incubate token. That's going to be a 5/5 when it flips.
And there's the patience being rewarded. Harper did wait to deploy that Sunfall, now having even a bigger incubation token. That is a 5/5. That's one of the win cons. Already also as one of the restless lands. That can be another way to win the game. And now also being going to be careful on when to use these no more lies.
Yeah, for sure. Here, Harper could have countered that Novice Spectre, denied May from the body and the clue, but is holding the no more lies, hoping to get something a bit juicier with the counter spell.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense here now, being able to catch that gleeful demolition.
Wow. What a heads up patient play there from Harper.
Yeah, and you always think that your opponents are going to deploy the smallest threat first, right? To bait the counter and then actually play the biggest threat.
Yeah. Oh no, the second Gleeful. Is that the fourth Gleeful Demolition this game?
Look, you cannot play around everything, right? Come on.
That's certainly very true. The Gleef, like sometimes your opponent is just gonna have it. And here is the Knight Errant of Eos once again. It's gonna find 2 copies of Sanguine Evangelist. And now Harper with Memory Deluge has some options here. Gonna make the Samurai, it looks like. And Filipa, what do you think Harper's plan is for the next couple of turns?
Well, there's still Otawara that can remove a threat, but that's the thing with Otawara. You don't really want to get the knight back, which is the biggest threat, because the knight then gets the effect again, and Maeve gets to get more threats again. That I think the idea is to survive and then get that memory deluge to try to find a board wipe.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Maeve is gonna activate this Warden. The Warden of the Inner Sky, by the way, such and just insane for a 1-drop.
Yeah, that card is so good.
So good. Like the scry for these aggro decks, and I think Magic in days past used to think of aggro decks as maybe running out of steam. They don't have enough value, and like you say, the Nightmare Errant of Eos for sure, picking up more cards, but just smoothing out your draws with the Warden has seemed so valuable for these Boros decks.
Yeah, that card is really, really sweet. And I mean, it's fairly recent from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and I think it just fits very well in this deck.
For sure. And look at this. Maeve not going to attack into the 5/5 token. And that's going to give. Oh,
There it is.
yeah, there's a second Sunfall for Harper.
Yeah, and this point, when you do have Wandering Emperor, plus the Sunfall.
Yeah, it's hard. It's going to be tough, right? Is there anything that Maeve can do? I mean, they've done such a good job playing against this control deck so far, but
there's always something, but it would take a lot of insane draws one after the other. Sanguine is obviously a great card because it does put 2 bodies on the battlefield. The thing is that the die effect doesn't even matter that much against this deck because almost every board wipe exiles.
Oh yeah, that's true. There's no depopulates. It's just the lockdowns and the sunfalls, plus
Yeah.
farewell that exiles as well. And now Harper says, "I am turning the corner. I have a 9/9 incubate. I have a 5/5 incubate. Your life total is only quote unquote only 18. Oh, and fire up the anchorage as well, Filipa.
I really like that, realizing when she needs to be aggressive. And that's not a quality that blue eyed players need to have. They need to know when to come back from that defense position to come into the attack. So that's perfect. Not giving enough time for Maeve to somehow recoup. Because, cards
Yeah.
like a recruiter can be very explosive. I mean, especially if you have a way to get glyphal demolition into an artifact and then play the recruiter, things can get very dicey
Mm,
quickly. So I really like the
right.
attack here.
For sure. Yeah, Harper has really played a textbook control game. Like just very good execution of patience plus knowing what to counter plus deploying the sweepers properly and Maeve, what is this last card in hand? I mean, if it's recruiter, there's still scary. There's still scary things to be had.
Yeah, it can be, but there's a get lost and two marshes in end. So it's not even enough. That battle cry though, and I'm surprised because here Harper did let that resolve, so that's going to be
Mm.
some damage. But then, I mean, it doesn't really matter because Maeve just going to die on the crackback, I guess. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, the it's definitely a little bit scary to go down to 3, but there's no burn in this deck. You know, the epicures can definitely go to face, but there's no lightning bolts or anything like that. So
And
pretty safe there.
that's the magic of open deck list, right? You can do these things
Mm.
where, I mean, sure, attack, I'll take all the damage. I know you have one card in hand and there's not one single card in your deck that can win the game right now, so I'll just take it.
Yeah, that you're right, Felipe. The open deckless format definitely means that you can make those kind of edge case calls a lot better. But let's have a look at game number 2 now. Maeve needs to win this one and the next one in order to walk away with the win from week number 6 for Harper. She's a game up already, so she just needs to close this one out. And she's going to keep this opening hand again of March of Otherworldly the Light, the Wandering Emperor, and Memory Deluge on the draw this time, Felipe.
Yeah, I think here the Boros Convoke list really needs to bring the invasion of Gobakan. That's going to be an amazing tool. And also War Leader's Call is an enchantment that can be really good because it does not get removed by the board wipes and it keeps making threats with every creature entering the battlefield. But what a start.
Yeah, that Epicure into Warden is pretty sweet, but I think Maeve was on the mull to 5, so really not where you want to be, I guess, against control decks, which want to outvalue you anyway. Harper's just gonna say, I'm let's just get this Warden out of here right now.
I mean, that's a wise choice. We saw how good that card was last game. Even though it was not enough, it was a very solid card. So I respect that. And Harper does have a lot of great things in hand.
Yeah, 2 copies of Memory Deluge, which can help her find pretty much anything they need. Wandering Emperor and that temporary lockdown. Here comes the Knight Errant of Eos, though, from Maeve, and this is going to help with making up for that mulligan quite a bit.
It will help, although I think Maeve is missing land drops, which might make things more difficult because Harper will soon start to deploy multiple threats every turn, multiple memory deluge, get more cards, and Maeve will have more trouble with only 2 mana available.
Wow, it's going to be a Wandering Emperor first, though, for Harper, and that Knight Errant of Eos is looking like a pretty juicy target for the -2.
Yeah, it's perfect. Now the only threat that survived to temporary lockdown is gone. So Harper will be able to play that temporary lockdown and sweep the whole board next turn. Let's see if Maeve does commit more or not.
It's tough, right? Because when you, in Maeve seat, like as you say, the no third land, that's pretty a tough position to be in because you want to use your mana, you want to be casting your spells, but knowing that your opponent has all of those sweepers and having to balance those considerations. Very difficult position here for Maeve. And they're going to play out Novice Inspector, which is a nice bit of both, right? A nice bit of future planning, but also some board presence.
Temporary lockdown is also really good because it does also remove the artifacts. And
Oh,
I mean, yeah, the thing is that Maeve does have ways with Destroy Evil sideboard to destroy the temporary lockdown, but a lot of the creatures are actually tokens, so you do get some value back, but not all the value.
yeah, for sure. And there is the temporary lockdown. 4 copies in the main deck for Harper. They are serving her well. And Maeve gets to follow up with the Warden plus Epicure again. But it is looking very difficult here for Boros Convoke.
Yeah, because at this point you only have 2 cards in hand. What do you really need? You need a land, but then land and you only have 2 spells is also not ideal.
Yeah, it's hard to see how they can come back from this. And then second copy of Wandering Emperor, that is I think it's going to be tough for Maeve to recover, but that's why we play the game. And Harp is actually just saying, yeah, you know what? I have a second copy. I'm just going to use my first copy now, get this Warden off the battlefield, and really try and close the door in this game.
The blue white deck does not only need to not die, but also needs to find a way to eventually win. I mean, there's that restless anchorage there, but so far, that's it.
What is this deck playing for threats other than Wandering Emperor? Like, is there a big thing, a big control finisher type thing?
Well, you have the Chrome Seed Shark there that we are seeing probably entering after sideboard. There's Wandering Emperor does make tokens. You have the Sunfall. Sunfall usually, especially against aggro decks, does create a big incubation token. That's a way to win. And just
Hmm.
honestly, the lands as well. You have Myrex and the Restless Anchorage.
Or that makes sense. So here is Chrome Host Sea Shark out of the sideboard. Nice little flying creature that, of course, is going to generate a bunch of these incubate tokens as Harper casts more non-creature spells. And when your opponent has the Chrome Host Sea Shark and there's 4 mana up, it does look pretty difficult. 2/4, a nice body as well, just even as a blocker, Filipa.
Yeah, it is a great body. And as you said, now we'll be able to do things like Memory Deluge, which usually is not great against aggro because you are wasting 4 mana and not making any threat or way to block, but you do make a 4/4 incubation if you have the Seed Shark. So it's a great way to combine these two elements of control, but also having something to defend.
For sure. I'm just having a look at the sideboard there, and there you're gonna see it. Maeve is gonna scoop things up, cannot come back from this disadvantage, and Harper Wilson is gonna be taking away the win from division number 14. Filipa, I mean, they put a lot of supers in the main deck. They were ready for this matchup.
Yeah, I think they were definitely ready for this matchup. When I saw 4 temporary lockdown main, I was like, yep, +4 Sunfall and 1 Farewell. This is well prepared against the Boros Convoke deck. So pretty unfortunate for the Boros Convoke player, but I mean, pretty sweet to also see how both these decks can sometimes go off. And yeah, it was a couple of good games that we saw here.
Yeah, and honestly, I think Maeve also definitely deserves a round of applause there because they played very, very well against a difficult deck, a difficult opponent.
Yeah, they play really well. I really like the way that they kind of assess the threats and also keeping cards in hand. And it was very well played and balanced, which you do need to know how to do if you're playing this deck.
Mm, for sure, for sure. All right, so that was our first match of the evening. We saw Blue White Control, maybe showing why it's at the top of the metagame this week. But now we can go on to our second match of the evening. And let's have a look at our first deck list. It's in the hands of Noor Singh. And this is sweet. I mean, we've talked a lot, I think, on the broadcast probably last week about the 68 card special in the hands of CFT from Chicago, but this is 68 cards flavor, but the slogan that was the defining feature of these decks, or maybe the defining features of these decks of past, has been dropped.
Yeah, and I'm honestly really excited to see this game because it is a game in my division, and I am facing Noor next week, and I know she's an amazing player. So I'm really excited to see here such a different deck showcased, and I also really like the answers here to the questionnaire.
Yeah, for sure. Nora's telling us the card that has impacted her play the most, Aftermath Analyst. They were trying to do a normal VML season, play good decks, swap every week, but instead you can pry the lands deck from their cold dead hands, and I love that. I love that from Noor, and I also love this list. Let's talk about it. All right, Filipa, let's talk about this. What is this deck trying to do?
So this deck kind of reminds me of the domain deck that it kind of ramps you up, but it's not like that. It does have a way for you to get lands back from the graveyard. So you're playing with cards like Splendid Reclamation that honestly I haven't heard in a while that allow you to return all land cards from graveyard to battlefield tap. And then you have ways to put lands in your graveyard. So you have, for example, ways to mill with the Aftermath Analyst, and you have a lot of these lands that haven't seen a lot of play. The lands for New Capenna that you have to then when to the battlefield they are sacrificed, and also the survey land. So you have ways to get these lands into the graveyard and then return them all.
Yeah, for sure. I had to say, in Chicago, I did get to see the original version of this deck in action, like in paper, and it was one of the craziest experiences of my life. Like, the CFD who was playing it just had all of the permanents in their deck just laid out on the table, and they had a big piece of paper where they were just writing a spreadsheet by hand and teaching two judges how the combos in this deck. It was crazy. Their opponent was like eating a banana, pressed F6. Like, it was absolutely insane, but very enjoyable experience. And I'm hoping we get to see some of that magic here today. Let's have a look at Noor's opponent's deck and see what they've bought. And it's very funny. I think now is a good time to talk about deck names, because in the VML, you can name your deck and give it an archetype. And Noor named Fair Deck No Gurk No Problem. And Danni, whose deck we see here as for midrange, named their deck Anti-Gurk Technology. So it just gives you a little bit of the flavor of the VML players kind of trying to level up on each other, Filipa.
Yeah, and I saw here that it's funny that although Nor did not bring the Slogurk, she did bring a very interesting deck that is not meta at all. So very difficult here for Danny to try to bring something against it. And actually, Danny is one of the people that is top on this division. I have lost against Danny, and Danny is very good at knowing what your opponent is going to play. So the week that I played against Danny, they were completely prepared to destroy my Rakdos midrange deck. So I am sure that Danny is out there and thinking, oh, I think that Nori is going to bring the Gurk deck. No luck, but I mean, it still has a lot of good things against this deck that Nor decided to bring. I really like Tishana's Tidebinder as a card as well, and the inclusion of Elish Norn. So very, very interesting
Oh,
cards here.
Elish Norn. Okay, all right, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because the no gurk combo does rely a lot on Nissa, the aftermath Nissa resurgent animist and the landfall ability. So I'm pretty interested to see how this plays out. Let's go down to the action. Danny on Esper midrange up against Noor on 4-color no gurk, and we are going to get to watch from the side of Noor, it looks like. And what do you think about this opening hand here for both players?
Well, to be honest, you do have some key cards, but both players have the same issue, which is only having two lands. I'm sure both players would be happy if they had access to one more land. And we see both of them keeping because they are good ends, but you really are relying on getting that additional land.
All right, so Danny's going to be leading off with the Rafine's Tower. There is a deep cavern bat available for Danny on turn number 2, and Nor found that third land, by the way.
I mean, yeah, Nordy found the third land, but Danny did not. And sometimes this
Yeah.
happens. I mean, there's still one more turn to have access, but no land here is going to be very difficult to deal with because you can take off one Nisa, but you cannot take off two right now.
Right, and here comes the deep cavern bat. Danny's going to get to see what Nor has going on. A pretty bat-proof hand, really, from Nor's side.
Yeah, it's really bad proof. Also, one of the cards in adventure, so that is
Yeah.
very, very well positioned there. Uh, and it's going to be a difficult decision here for Danny. I mean, the other two cards are more late game. That Memory Deluge can also represent a lot of a threat, and obviously as well the World Soul's Rage, but more later game.
Yeah, Walsall's Rage, a newer addition to this deck, is kind of just a fireball. But you do also get to put lands from your hand and or graveyard onto the battlefield tap. So does a little bit of acting as a finisher or maybe a little bit of ramp at some point earlier in the game as well. Liette, Disciple of the Drowned, the draw for Nor, but she's going to just start out with this Callan in the air.
And then here are some answers like the Go for Throat can take care of that Kellen, but at the same time, no land again. And you don't want to have no land against a deck that is known for getting lands back from the graveyard and ramping.
Yeah. Yeah, the mana disadvantage is going to get to be pretty intense here. And Danny's going to be taking Memory Deluge with the second bat. So that's a pretty interesting choice there from Danny, wanting to deny the card advantage here from Nor.
And I saw a message, I think it's from Noor, that this deck does have more than 50% lands,
Ah,
which I
that makes
find
sense.
fascinating.
Yeah, well, look, you've got it. That's why you have to play 68 cards, right? So that you can have the right number of lands plus the right number of spells. And speaking of spells, by the way, there is that Elishnorn, the beautiful Phyrexian Elishnorn for Danny, but not really what they're hoping to see, given that there's still no third land for them.
And speaking of lands, this one is going to do a lot of work here with Nisa on the battlefield. But okay, able to use Go for Throat. Nisa still does get one trigger, but does not get the second one. Still, this is going to be 5 mana available, and that's going to be enough to deploy some threats. There are several options. And looks like we are going right away for the World Soul Rage, taking care of one of the bats.
Ah, okay. So it's going to be X2 because there are two lands in the graveyard. They're going to come back. And Danny's going to scoop it up. That's too much to deal with. No third land for Danny. So not a bit of an unfortunate draw out there for our Esper player. But let's have a look at the sideboards now. And what do you like to change here for Nor?
I'm taking a look here at North sideboard, and I mean, there's some options. You have cut down, can get rid of things like Raffine, the bot as well. You also have access to cards like Cut Seal, which is a fun card. It's a 3 mana, 3/3. Your opponents cannot cast spells during your turn. So that's really good that if you want to protect your Nisas and they're not going to be able to cast things like Go for Throat.
Hmm. That card, by the way, was so terrible to play against in limited. I just you said Kutsil and I was like, I just had shivers come over me because every time your opponent played that against you in Lost Cabins Limited, it was like GG. It was just awful. Anyway, that's me and my trauma from past limited formats, which is often a feature, actually probably more often a feature of these broadcasts than strictly necessary. But here we are.
I also really like how the deck from Noor is really well prepared with a lot of different sideboard cards. I mean, you have Tranquil Frillbag that is great against things that are running enchantments, so it can be very good against decks that are playing Wedding Announcement
Mm-hmm. That makes
or
sense.
the Virtue as well, which usually go together.
And now we're going to have a look at Danny's sideboarding. I saw those two copies of Unlicensed Hearts come in. That makes sense. Tishana's Tidebinder. Liliana of the Veil also getting, at least being considered here. What do you think about some of these choices?
Well, Tishana's Tidebinder makes completely sense to me. I mean, you do get to counter a trigger ability. You can counter, for example, the Nissa, and since Nissa is a creature, then it's going to lose all abilities. You can also counter the trigger from Atraxa, because although we didn't see Atraxa game one, Noor is playing a couple of Atraxas in the deck. It can also counter one of the triggers from the lands being saxed. So there's a lot of options there for the Tishana's Tidebinder.
Getting your fetch land stifled? What format is this?
Yeah, I mean that happens a lot in modern, right? We are used to it. It's great against the fetch lands, but I mean when your opponent is playing these new Capena sacrifice lands,
It could happen, for sure, for sure.
everything can happen.
Everything can happen. And Danny taking their time to have a good think, which I think we should be encouraging everybody to do, because I know sometimes that I definitely sideboard too quickly sometimes and don't really think through all the iterations. But Danny really having a like making sure that every card in their deck has a purpose, and I think that that's such a good way to approach it.
Yeah, and I mean I know these players. They are both in my division, and I have to say this game is really important for them. We talked before about how important week 6 is, and our
Mhm.
division is tight. It's tight between like four different players, and two of them are exactly Danny and Noor. So this game is very decisive.
Yeah, I mean, you say it's decisive for them, but honestly, Filipa, it sounds like it's decisive for you.
It is. It is. Right now, I am sweating. I'm 4-2. I'm going against North next week for a win and in into top 32. You bet that I'm sweating here to see what happens.
Exciting stuff from this division, and it's going to be duress on one for Danny, and they're equipped with many more lands this time than the previous game, so that's a good start at least for them.
Yeah, very good start. And I mean, this deck always is supposed to have a lot of lands if it's working well. I mean, it is a big part of the deck. It's in a big percentage. And I really like also the end from Danny.
Yeah,
Fairy
very
Mastermind
mastermind.
into Rafine is so strong because if you start conniving early on, things can go really well.
Yeah, fairy mastermind, being able to hold that up and occasionally be able to get an extra card out of it is very sweet. But here it is in the end step. Use Takahashi's invitational card, of course, and it's going to be the follow up for Rafine. And no, looking at that Path of Peril in hand, I mean, it does deal with the Fairy Mastermind, but she doesn't have access to 2 black next turn, and it doesn't do anything about the Rafine, Filipa.
Exactly. And Rafine is a big, big threat. That card can start conniving. And really interesting here that Danny decided to discard the only spell they had in order to put a counter on the Fairy Mastermind. So really relying here that this Rafine is going to survive, there's going to be more connivings, and that this game needs to end soon because they're not going to win this on the late game.
Yeah, what a decision. Like, I don't think I would have been brave enough to make that decision, but I could 100% see, why Daddy did it. And like you said, just knowing exactly what your role is in the game and kind of just making sure that you're always playing towards your victory condition. So sweet.
Yeah, and knowing Norn, and Danny knowing that Nor does not have access to a black source yet really helps giving information, and a lot of lands do enter tapped. So I think Danny's thinking, I have a small window here, and I have to go as fast as I can.
Yeah, and that World Soul's Rage that Danny knows about, just playing around that, putting the counter on, getting the Fairy Mastermind out of range. And here comes both flyers now. Rafine going to be conniving a couple more times, and those are some nice pickups for Danny.
Yeah, very nice pickups. We did talk about that Tishana's Tidebinder. It does work well against a lot of cards and it can be played in instant speed. Also, the bat can be really, really good um, in order to now see what's the biggest threat and remove it.
What do you think here? What are you taking?
I think it's going to be these. I mean, it depends. This Nisa can really go off very soon, but there's also the Path of Peril. Although, yeah, the Path of Peril does make sense because he does get rid of a couple of things. So I'm sure Danny was not happy though to see that Nisa as well.
Yeah, for sure. But Wildsoul's Rage is going to now be targeting the bat, and that's going to put two of these lands back on the battlefield. They're going to sacrifice themselves, go to the graveyard, and get more lands out of Noor's deck. And something we haven't talked about yet, Filipa, not only do these lands combo in the sense that they put themselves back in the graveyard, but they're also gaining Noor life every time they trigger.
Yeah, and one life for every time these lands trigger, which hopefully is multiple times if you're Nor. Um, this stacks up because suddenly Nor is at 17 after taking multiple eats from these creatures.
Right, exactly. And here comes the attack again. It's going to be for 5. Rafine see some lands. And we're going to see Danny now start to pitch away these lands, really looking for spells. Holding Tishana's Tidebinder, they know about the Atraxa in Noor's hand.
Yeah, and that Atraxa is definitely such a scary card. There's the Tishana's Tidebinder, but still, it's such a powerful card, and it's going to be able to enter very soon. And now there's also
Yeah.
the Path of Peril.
Right, because Noor got that back after killing the bat. So that could take care of the fairy mastermind. Tishana's Tidebinder is going to make this Nissa not be able to do very much, but Noor with the cut down ready to kind of send this merfolk back.
Yeah, and cut down here being a very, very crucial card. This card, if you first of all removes bats, removes fairies, and if you get it before some connive triggers, it does take care of Rafine for only 2 mana. So it can be really, really good. And we see that
Yeah,
right away, no more conniving.
yeah, great timing there from Noor taking out the Rafine. And basically saying, this Tishana's Tidebinder, it can stick around. I'm not going to be using this Nissa. I have an Atraxa in hand. And Danny keeps swinging in with the Fairy Mastermind, but it's difficult to know how long they're going to be able to keep up this aggression.
Yeah, and I mean, Nor is at 8 live, but there's Atraxa, and we know about it. Atraxa is, as you said, such a powerful card, and the life link is definitely going to be
Ugh.
difficult. Ooh, that's a draw.
Go for the throat the fine for Danny. Okay. All right. I mean, it's not going to stop the trigger from Atraxa, nor it's going to get to draw a bunch more cards. But like you say, taking out this huge threat with lifelink does mean that there's a possibility, right? Like Danny can see the crack in the window, as it were, of this game.
Yep, that's definitely true. And here we see that Nor actually might just go for a board wipe.
Oh, the Path of Peril, the full cleave cost being paid, and that is all the creatures are going to be destroyed. It's almost the hidden mode on Path of Peril for Noor.
Yeah, this is insane how well Nor is playing and realizing that I only die if I get the damage multiple
Oh,
times
that's
from something.
Alishnon.
Yeah, it is. What a
This game is
game.
great. Yeah,
Yeah.
this game is insane. Alishnon off the top for Danny. And for those of you who aren't fluent in Phyrexian, like I'm sure Filipa, you and I are, um, this she's gonna not only be a massive threat on the battlefield, but also stop any enter the battlefield's abilities from North side, and that includes the Atraxa, of course.
I have to say, like, tell me, this is my division. You see how unlucky I am? Like, come on.
Felipe, I have a lot of sympathy. I have a lot of sympathy for that.
when I saw that I was in this division, I was like, I don't deserve this. Why me?
And not having to think about this virtue of strength. Oh my goodness. This deck is great. I have to say, Filipa, like, I love you and I want you to do very well, but I don't think I can not support this deck because it's just so crazy. Virtue of strength? Like, who's playing this card?
Nor I'm going to be ready next week when it's us battling. I'm going to bring all the all the Tishana's Tidebinders, all that I can bring against these, I don't know, exiling graveyards. Who knows? How can I even deal
Yeah.
with this? It's so difficult.
I'm gonna leave that to you to figure out. But we have uh Danny with Elishnon getting in for 4, and that's gonna put Noor down to 4, just one attack away from lethal. Danny has 2 copies of Go for the throw in hand, could also bring the Denic back from the graveyard as a flyer. Noor, meanwhile, is thinking about something kind of crazy because Lier is available, and there is a Soul of the World Rage, I believe, in the graveyard that can be cast. And I think Noor has double mana right now from all the basics.
And
Oh,
this is,
triple from the basics. Sorry, my bad.
there's basically infinite mana at this point.
Basically infinite. Hmm.
Okay, and we see there the Danik entering the battlefield.
Okay, all right.
And I'm not
So
sure what's in the graveyard. I mean, I'm not sure if there's the card that deals damage and puts lands into play.
there is one copy of it. There's also a Terror Tide, so that could be like a board wipe
Oh,
here. Except I think it's only 4 right now, so it wouldn't actually even kill the Elishnorn.
there's also the Path of Peril.
Oh, yes, you're right.
The thing is that that makes you also lose your Lear.
Hmm. But it
So
does
the
get rid
question,
of the Elishnorn, right? At
it
least.
does. The question is, do you want to do something before with your graveyard before you deploy this board wipe?
Right. Wow, looks like Noah might actually not use the board wipe, just use these uh spot removal spells, cut down to take care of the disturbed side of Denic, and Soul's Rage X7, thanks to all that mana being produced by Virtue of Strength. And that is going to be taking out Elishnorn. So ultimately, Nord finds a way to keep that Liao on the battlefield.
Yeah, very, very well played there. And I was expecting to see the go for throat in response because the World Souls is sorcery speed. So that could be a window there that Danny could have used.
Ah,
And I think that's why we are seeing the oops there.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Nor opting not to put those lands back on the battlefield. Here is Nissa. And now passing turn back to Danny, needs to find a threat. Finds a Rafine. That is a threat.
That is a threat. I mean, but there's a Traxa now. Even though there's a okay, there's the go for truth, but what are the odds that this Atraxa does not find an answer with the amount of mana that also Nor has available? I would say it's really low.
Did Nor just tap 4 lands to pay for a Traxa? Get out of here. What is happening? All right,
Yeah,
there's a bunch of options here available, Filipa. What do you like?
I mean, I see the memory deluge is a good. I mean, the land is also really good because you do have Nisa. A board wipe can always be necessary. And I mean, can you really have too many Atraxas?
I think the answer must be no, but Nor, it seems like, has other priorities, shall we say, with all of this mana available.
Yeah,
Aftermath Analyst, obviously such a huge combo piece here with Nissa, and actually this must be enough mana now for the Infinite.
Yeah, and that's where what we also see how Faye is so good at this, because we see how that that discipline to not get a second Atraxa and just go for uh, the aftermath.
Well, this is kind of what we came here to see with this deck. The aftermath analyst Nissa shenanigans, and Memory Deluge finds another Nissa off the top, finds another Virtue of Strength. Those are not legendary, by the way. So if you're thinking back to like Great Henge days, etc., this is not that. You can have multiple of these if you want, which is absolutely insane.
Yeah,
um,
and I think if we open a dictionary and we seek for the word value, this is the board state we are going to find an image of this exact board state.
Can someone clip Noor tapping a swamp and getting 9 mana? Oh my goodness. Here's the aftermath analyst. Yeah, mill 3 lands into the graveyard. Perfect. That's exactly what the doctor asked for. And here we go. Gets to sacrifice it. And oh my goodness.
Oh, I have no words for this. I have
It's happening.
no words.
Yeah, Danni. Excellent emote game from Danni.
This
Oh.
this is this was quite the game.
Yeah, and Danni got so close. Noah was at 4, and Danni had a 4/7, and on like a clear board. They were so close to closing out this game number 2, but ultimately, at this stage, it's just hard to see how anyone can come back against this deck.
Yeah, and did I mention that this is my division and that I'm going against Thor next week?
Yeah, I have to say, I have my sympathy for you, Filipa, is growing
Yeah.
with every minute. There you have it, Danni raises the GGs, and it is going to be Noor advancing to 5-1 in this division. Which division is this again, Filipa? Who's in it?
I don't know. I never heard. I mean, for sure, not me advancing at this phase, because let me tell you, the players are so good. I played against Danny. Danny is an amazing player, and now I'm going to play against Noor, which is another amazing player. And we saw here this deck and just building different decks being rewarded.
For sure, yeah. Danny prior to this was at the top of the Division 5 with 4-1. Noor also at 4-1. Danny's game win percentage before this was 75%, which is crazy. So yeah, that division, and there was another player at 4-1 going into this week in Division 5 as well. So certainly it's going to be a bit of a bloodbath. Of course, Filipa, we do wish you all the best going into the next week. But now we're going to go into our next feature match, our third one of the evening here, and week number 6. Let's have a look at what's going on. On the one side, we have Sylverfyre, and this time we're visiting Division 12. They're at 4-1, and they have brought Rakdos Midrange. Now, Filipa, I think you tell us about this deck.
Okay, so I have been playing this deck since week 1. Did I change it? Not only one time. Maybe I'll change it for the last week. Maybe I'll keep it. Who knows? But the truth is, I love this deck. I haven't changed a single card in it. And I love that more people are cascading into the win. It is a very, very good deck. I mean, you have a lot of cascade spells. And one thing that I actually really like about this deck that is undervalued is that the fact that you can actually get Cavern of Souls to be able to cast your spells, which makes them uncounterable, which is really important in a meta filled with no more lies.
I hate Cavern of Souls. as a counter spell enthusiast, like, whew, get out of here. Cavern of Souls and Thalia, my two least favorite cards. Just putting
Look,
that out.
I understand, but I personally disagree. I do not like counter spells, and I love counter of souls, cavern of souls. I love seeing my control player holding those 3 counter spells in hand, and
No,
me just being able to. slam my creatures. This deck is really good. It does rely a lot on the bat turn 2, trying to delay what your opponent's trying to do, and then have a lot of spells that are 2-for-1s with the Appraiser and also with the Carnosaur, and just a bunch of value and good mid-range stuff. And of course, Shieldred, because that card is great.
Yeah, I mean, can't really argue with you there. Shieldred, certainly very strong. Very excited to see this deck in the hands of Sylverfyre. Let's have a look at their opponent. And by the way, Filipa, I want to say that I'm finding it hilarious that you've both said you're going to radically change your deck in order to beat Slowcoke and said that you might just not change anything. And that is the kind of leveling that we expect from a VML competitor using their broadcast slot to try and play the mind games with their opponent. Love to see it, Filipa. Let's have a look at Juno's deck.
I have to try to get all the advantage that I can at this point after I saw this match. So I'll leave things very open.
Love it.
And we are seeing here that they did bring a 5-color ramp deck, and this is more the domain classic version. I was talking about how Noor was able to ramp, but this is the classic ramp deck that gets you Atraxa, which is one of the strongest cards available.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty familiar with this deck, right? Like it's been around for a few seasons. Actually, my friends and I we used to call this deck the Canadian monstrosity. Because it was first popularized by a bunch of Canadian people in the Canadian RC, and they took it to the Pro Tour, and obviously it's also just monstrous as a deck. It also used to play like Italy and stuff, right? So it was a little bit more monstrous before, but now Up the Beanstalk was printed. Long story. Anyway, point is, I in my heart this will always be the Canadian monstrosity playing against Rakdos mid-range Rakdos Cascade. And let's have a look at the matchup and see who's going to take this one home. Any predictions, Filipa?
Oh, it's really difficult to tell. It really depends because one thing that this deck has that is really strong is a combination of Up the Beanstalk with Leyline Binding, which just draws you so many cards for free almost. I mean, you for 2 mana get your Up the Beanstalk, and then Leyline Binding just for 1 mana, being able to draw you more cards, and then Atraxa with a lot of card draw. I actually would say that this is favored for the domain just because access to board wipes and leyline binding is a very key card, but it really depends because the Rakdos midrange can also have um, a very good end, which it's not the case for this one, I will tell you that.
Yeah, so if I unfortunately missing the third land with a bunch of 3 drops and expensive cards in hand, so they're going to be looking for. Oh, and they don't find it, Filipa.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be rough. Preacher of the Season is a great card, but at this point, you have to know that your opponent is running Leyline Binding, which is going to have such a discount. And once your opponent starts ramping, in this case, they will be in a very tough spot. So third land, though, it might
Okay.
not be too late, but
Yeah, let's have a look. And Sylverfyre is going to start out with the Graveyard Trespasser. By the way, every time I see Graveyard Trespasser played, I'm like, what year is it? Like, it was so hot in Standard, like 3 years ago. Just, which in Magic terms just feels like forever when you talk about the Standard format. And Juno says, I'm not going to use my Leyline Binding. I don't want to pay that discard. I'm just going to start using Invasion of Zendikar and getting that ramp on.
and that was really smart, actually, and also smartly played the Graveyard Trespasser because this Graveyard Trespasser, as you said, does have the ward cost. So a really good choice instead of playing something like Preacher. Here, really getting that Graveyard Trespasser that apparently doesn't get as much value as the Preacher can get against this deck, but it is more reliable to stay on the board.
Yeah, Graveyard Trespasser, a nice threat. Sylverfyre does keep finding the lands, so Black Cleavers does come in tapped, but is able to at least develop the mana base. Here comes Liliana of the Veil as well. She's going to start taking cards out of both players' hands, but importantly for Sylverfyre, out of Juno's hand. And Juno says, I think 3 Archangels of Wrath is probably too many. I can afford to get rid of one of them.
Yeah, and honestly, on the other side, I saw here that the Rakdos player did discard the Carnosaur, which usually is why I do run in this deck the Cruelty of Geeks, but I do see that they are not running it in this list. So a bit of a different choice there.
Hmm, for sure. No cruelty of Gix, but this is a pretty interesting turn. I mean, this played out really well here for Juno, using that Archangel double kick, take out the invasion, and then the invasion flips and takes out Liliana. So excellent um, value there for Juno out of this Archangel. And here comes Geological Appraiser for Sylverfyre, discovering into a Blood Tithe Harvester.
Yeah, that's not exactly what you want to see at this point. You really need a way to find removal. And things are not looking too
Oh,
good.
oh my goodness. Having both 3/2s taken out by the Archangel, that's gotta feel bad.
It does, and I feel the pain. Um, and I actually do really enjoy the list that Silverfyre decided to bring here. I think it's very solid and it's playing very well against the meta. But here, just unfortunate. First of all, with a matchup that is not exactly favorable, and then just stuck a bit in lands in the early game, which really cannot happen against a deck like Domain.
Yeah, not only stuck on lands, but also just drawing kind of a bunch of these 3 and 4 drops and not being able to get to that double spell turn. Super punishing. And this is even more punishing now that Awakened Skyclave taps for white. Leyline Binding comes down. That's an answer to Shieldred, and this is a massive attack now from Juno.
And actually, these angels are so great because they do have lifelink, which is so important in this meta. So the ability itself already does provide lifelink. So it is very resilient, even with more aggressive decks like Convoke, for example.
Yeah, for sure. And you see it there. Silverfire is going to scoop it up, and we have Juno with a game up on Domain, and quite a lot of changes here for Silverfire.
Yeah, I mean, you do not need the cut downs. I don't think there's a single card in the domain deck that does get affected by the cut down. The rest, extracted roots, that they're cards that we might see entering and just being able to disrupt key cards like Leyline Binding or Atraxa.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So a bunch of these Thoughtseize effects coming in.
Yeah, the difficult part is when you do have so many cards from the sideboard that you want to bring in. What do I take off, right? Like, how do I make sure that I am having end disruption, but at the same time, still keep my threats and 2 for 1s?
For sure. I see Archfiend of the Dross coming in for the sideboard. What do you think about this card?
This card is really powerful, especially if played early game. And here, I think it's a good card to bring when you are on the play. Of course, there's cards like Leyline Binding and Sunfall, but you cannot play around everything, and that's also where this deck kind of suffers. We talk about a bit about this in previous matches, but a lot of the board wipes now have Exile, and cards
Mhm.
like the Aclazot as well suffer so much for this.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, these dice effects used to be so powerful against control because it was just like a nightmare, right? Like you had to deal with the front side and then you had to deal with the back side. But yeah, the Sunfall in particular, what an insane sweeper. Like, honestly, the
Yeah,
power
that
level.
super has been great and really played, and I see why. I mean, the card is insane, and it also closes a lot of decks from being playable. We saw a lot of previous lists like Azorius Soldiers kind of declining popularity.
Mm, yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I remember when I first read Sunfall, I was like, wait, seriously? For 5 mana?
And the thing is that White has been getting so much access to cards like Farewell, Sunfall, Temporary Lockdown, Wandering Emperor. I mean, do you really? It's so many exile effects in just one color. White has
Leyline
been really
binding?
strong in standard. Leyline Binding. I mean, so many options, and it
Yeah, and
shows.
like even cards like Get Lost, I think I think in my mind when I first read Get Lost, I was like, oh, okay, they get 2 map tokens, whatever. But the fact that it hits enchantments, like it hits wedding announcement, I don't know. It's crazy, I think.
I think there was a time where rat effects were enough because creatures were not having a lot of die effects. But now, since creatures do have access to these, uh, white also gets access to cards that actually do take care of the board completely.
Hmm, for sure. All right, so now let's have a look at the sideboard changes. Well, quite a lot of changes here actually for Juno. Long goodbyes coming in. Nice answer to Liliana. Some Chrome Host Seed Sharks. We saw a little bit in action earlier on already in our feature matches, but it's back again. And let's have a look at the opening hands for both players. Is this one looking a little bit better here for Silverfyre?
Yeah, I do like this hand a lot. I also wanted to mention the long goodbye that I think here June did realize, okay, that graveyard trespasser ward effect is kind of annoying. So let me play a long
Oh,
goodbye that can actually just destroy it, and I don't have to discard a card.
that's so smart. I didn't even think about that, but that makes a lot of sense. It even says on the card, includes by the ward ability.
In a pre-release, I played one of these cards, and my opponent was it was an alternative art of not this one, but the slice something
Mm.
doesn't
Mhm.
play standard, and my opponent had to call a judge. They're like, "Judge, she didn't play
Aw.
the ward costs," and I was like, "Yeah, I don't have to."
For sure. Here comes Extract the Truth now. Looking at Topiary Stumper, Wandering Emperor, and Up the Beanstalk, all very valid choices, but ultimately takes away the ramp effect.
Yeah, the up the beanstalk can get very annoying, but from the cards that Silverfyre did see in Juno's end, there was nothing that could actually get any value from up the beanstalk. Of course, then there was a top deck of Earth Migration, but
Yeah, but it's gonna be a while before Juno's really able to get the Up the Beanstalk card from there.
uh, it's going to take a while. But in the meantime, Wandering Emperor, such a great card as well.
Hmm. Yeah, for
Definitely
sure.
a closer game, this one. Also, I really like the Preacher, but I think here, let's try to attack to see if that long goodbye is going to take care of that Blood Tide Harvester, but no. So this Preacher is going to enter the battlefield, and Silverfyre knows that there's that long goodbye in the other side.
There is, but it looks like Juno is actually going to prioritize using the herd migration, getting a plains. That's going to be the second white source for the Wandering Emperor. And now Silverfyre does have the 2 creatures on board, but knows that there is a Wandering Emperor coming from their opponent.
Very, very interesting here. I mean, this card, we were talking about it. It's really, really good. Of course, if your opponent does have Leyline Binding or Sunfall, it's not going to be as great, but we don't see none of those cards in Juno End.
Yeah, Aklazos comes down, the Bat Daddy, as some have called him. It was me. I was there, some people.
I
and
love it. It shall be called like that from now on. Of course, there's Wandering Emperor that can take care of Bat Daddy later on.
yeah. Yeah, the Bad Daddy does not win in the fight
No,
against the Wandering Emperor, unfortunately.
I think our Planeswalker mommy is going to take care of it really soon.
Planeswalker Mom against Bad Daddy. The family from hell.
There's also Leyline Binding, which is for 1 mana, does not only completely takes care of a permanent, but also draws a card because of that up the beanstalk.
Yeah, wasn't this combo too powerful for modern? I mean, didn't we have a ban about this?
Yep.
And And here it is in standard, terrorizing opponents. And sylverfyre, I have to say, has played a very patient game, really done a good job of trying to draw out the cards that they know must be in hand for Juno. It's going to use this Restless Vents now, start getting in.
And I've been in this spot. I've been in Silverfyre spot with this deck playing against the main, and it's not a good feeling when these things start to happen because you don't really have a lot of options. You
Mm.
can deploy your threats, try to manage them well, which I think they are doing a great job doing so. But it gets to a point that is really difficult when there are so many options on the other side.
Yeah, for sure. And this is very heads up here by sylverfyre as well, recognizing, okay, you use Leyline Binding on the Akazars, which means that I have to not attack with this Restless Vent and save it so I can cast Bitter Triumph. That is going to happen.
Yeah, and Bitter Triumph, also another great card.
Yeah, a great addition to standard.
Yeah, I really like to play Bitter Triumph, discard a big spell, then do my Cruelty of Geeks, get that spell back.
For sure. Filipa, I was playing I was on the Magic Online channel with Niall on Monday playing Reenact the Crime. It was so much fun. We were using Bitter Triumph to put like the you get the conspiracy guy, the one that makes all your spells cost collect 10, and then you use
Oh,
breach.
that card is so good. And you just play things for free.
Yeah, and then you use breach, and then you like your graveyard is just filled with stuff, and you can play a track set. It was great. It's super fun.
So you were with Nile traumatizing poor MTGO players.
Yeah, yeah. We the Boros Convoke players did not like it when you get an Atraxa and you get their Immodane's Recruiter with breach, and you give your Atraxa haste.
Fair.
Speaking of Atraxa, here she comes.
She comes, she draws a card because of Up the Beanstalk. She, in the meantime, gets access to like 5 more cards. And she also has Flying, Lifelink,
Yeah.
Vigilance.
And
And
Death
and
Touch.
now we
But
see
why Death
there.
Touch? Seriously, why Death Touch? Come on. She's a 7/7 flyer. She did not need Death Touch.
Yeah, but she also has that touch, and you know that bad daddy is looking very sad because okay, I attack, I'll make you discard one of your 20 cards, and then that attracts a blocks, gains life in the process.
If this Bat Daddy and Planeswalker mom, what is Atraxa? She's got to be like the granny, right?
I don't know. She's it all. I mean, Atraxa does everything for you.
She does do everything for you. And she is right on the battlefield, hoping, at least for Juno, they're hoping that Atraxa is going to sweep them into the victory for this particular match. For sylverfyre, kind of running out of gas at this point. Restless Vents gets to get in. That has Menace, so and at least that gets to have a look at some more cards. Oh, and that's a bat, but unfortunately, sylverfyre's land is tapped. They cannot play the bat this turn.
And things start getting really difficult here. I mean, there's a Leyline Binding, then there's also the Archangel of Wrath that can deal 4 more damage phase. That Atraxa is going to deal 7 damage.
Oh,
There's also Earth Migration in the meantime that's going to create 5/3/3s. A lot of options, and none of them are looking good.
yeah, it does not seem like it's going to be that easy for Rakdos to deal with this herd migration. Preacher of the Schism is not going to do it. Sylverfyre scoops things up, and that is the victory going to Juno on domain ramp against Rakdos midrange. So, Filipa, you did say that it was going to be a tough one for the Rakdos deck, and it did play out that way.
Yeah, at least that's the experience that I've been feeling. It's usually really difficult to deal with that. Also, decks like Blue-White Control. So there are definitely some things that this deck cannot beat. It is really good. I feel like at beating other aggressive decks and other mid-range decks because of the 2-for-1 with the um, with the Discover. But yeah, this is a rough matchup. That deck has so much value. That Atraxa is so good, and we saw the Beanstalk also playing a big part.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to what you were saying right at the beginning, Filipa, where standard is so long and there are so many great cards. The power level of cards is so high in standard right now. And in fact, it's hard to really think of a time when the power level of cards was this high across all decks, right? Like we've seen a lot of broken decks in standard, but not this many, I think, decks with such high power level.
For sure. And if we saw a card like years ago, a card like Shieldred, Atraxa, Leyline Binding, Sunfall, between many others, we would think that this card needs to be banned. But there are so many strong cards in each deck that makes that nothing really needs to be banned, just because there's every deck has access to have their own powerful things, and just we see the power creep kind of staying in standard now with also this increase in rotation.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Filipa, I have to ask you, would you support my campaign to get Fable of the Mirror Breaker unbanned in standard?
I mean, I would. I love playing Rakdos. I would love that to happen. But at the same time, Fable does bring a lot of reanimation power and much more into the table. I love it. I mean, unban it all. Unban Fable, unban Meatwood Massacre. Why only White gets the good board wipes?
That's fair. I think you're right. I think if you hook Masker probably does deserve its consideration back in. I just realized that Fable and Reenact the Crime would be absolutely disgusting. So it's possible that Fable should probably stay banned, but I don't know. I love it, and I am very happy to see this format being so powerful and exciting. All right, let's have a look now. I think we are ready to have a look at our fourth and final feature match of the evening here from week 6 of the VML. Let's have a look at the first player, and it's Nicole. It's Lady of the
It's
Crease,
Nicole.
and Nicole looks surprised that she's here.
I love the picture. I have to laugh. Nicole is such a gem. I really love this picture here. And Nicole does recognize the power of some ramp deck, and I love this choice here. Once again, we just saw how powerful this deck can be. So let's see it once more with this ramp. I'm just taking a look here at this list. It seems pretty standard, pretty much what we have been seeing. I really like the inclusion of 3 temporary lockdowns, 2 depopulates, and 3 sunfalls. I mean, this is well prepared against aggro.
Yeah, and actually, I really want to draw attention to what Nicole said about her approach to the matchup, because she said she looked at a lot of opening hands and realized that in a matchup like this, a lot of games are won and lost in disciplined mulliganing. And I think that's so sweet. Like, that's such a great lesson to take away, because it we talked about it earlier with the control list. When you're playing a slower deck against these aggro lists, and we'll have a look at it in just a second, but like having that discipline to say this hand is too slow, I need to send it back, even if it looks like lands and spells, is very, very key. And Nicole doing a great job here. Let's have a look at her opponent's deck, and we'll see a little bit about what she's talking about. It is Bant Toxic in the hands of Sarah England, who, by the way, is a local BC Canada player, and she very, very accomplished player for sure, has been on the GP circuit and played PTs in the past as well.
And yeah, this deck is great. And once again, what you said about the mulligan, it is very correct. And especially against this deck, Nicole needs to be able to really assess what a mulligan is, because you cannot really afford to keep certain ends when your opponent is threatening to give you poison damage by like turn 3.
Yeah, that is very true. Ban Toxic. I have to say, Filipa, when the Toxic decks first came around, when it was green white Toxic, I was kind of not impressed. Like, I tested the deck for an RC and I thought the mana is so bad, like Mirex. Ugh, and then the cards just seemed very kind of whatever. But having seen this Bant list in action a few times, I have to say it is so impressive. March of the Swirling Mist, devastating.
You know what I think it's funny is that this deck didn't really gain anything from the recent sets, and people just came to the conclusion because there was a lot of, oh, I'm going to play the green white toxic deck, the Selesnya one, or I'm going to play the other version with the Rod Priest and protection spells, which is the Simic one, and the deck kind of stopped playing for a while or became a bit less popular, and then someone had the idea, why not both? Let's have a band deck that has the best of both worlds, and suddenly this deck is great. I mean, I love it. It has both ways. You can just go with the aggro aspect of it, but you also have the Rod Priest into being able to protect your creatures kind of way, and just getting the poison counters this way.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's go down to the action and see who's going to win out between these very two different decks. Bant Toxic going up against Domain Control, and we're going to have Lady of the Crease Nicole on the lower half of your screen. And let's see what her hand is looking like. Is this one of those disciplined mulligans, Filipa?
I mean, I think so. It has to be right. I mean, you are able to play up the beanstalk turn three. I mean, Nicole is on the play, which does make a bit of a difference. And there's a lot of lands in this deck. So I think Nicole here taking that uh, decision now, that careful decision. But we see already on the other side two Road Priests and one Jobo Duelist. No protection spells for the creatures. But yeah, I like this decision by Nicole to mulligan. Although the end would not be terrible with a couple of lands and maybe a temporary lockdown, you would have to draw into it. So
For sure. And Nicole making the discipline decision ends up with a hand that is maybe a little bit slow to get started, but has the ramp, has the stomper, has the invasion, and has the Archangel of Wrath, which is so sweet against these small creatures. Meanwhile, though, it's going to be Sarah England out on the board first with the Rot Priest on one.
yeah, and as you said, it's definitely really sweet. The Archangel of Rad is going to take some time, and I think Nicole here are really hoping to not miss land drops and to try to find something like a sunfall or a temporary lockdown.
It's going to be Topiary Stumper to start with. It's the little dinosaur hedge. Is that what it is? It's a dinosaur that's also a hedge.
I guess it is very adorable and it's getting Annex Sentry. Although it cannot attack or block yet, with this deck, that can start happening really soon. And we see here Sarah making a really, really good aggression. And Nicole is not at 16 life. Nicole is at 6 poison counters from that.
Yeah, that 16 is certainly very deceptive. It's all about the poison counters here for Nicole, and really, it's all about Nicole's poison total because once Sarah's life total, it's not going to matter until much later.
And that's the thing. Archangel of Wrath is great. It will be able to take care of some creatures, but the lifelink part is almost irrelevant.
Mm, that's a great point. And Nicole's got to be thinking about, what do I do? This Beseju can be played as a land. Could channel it maybe and think about getting the Topiary Stomper back. Ultimately decides to just play Archangel for kicker once. And that is going to take out the Rot Priest. Jawbone Duel is still active, but now Nicole at least has a blocker.
Yeah, so Sarah does have that fading hope, and at this point, this is a race. So even though that angel can get back, get more value, it is really crucial here to start dealing more and more poison. And this is three more, leaving Nicole at 7 poison counters.
That is a lot of poison counters, and there's another Jawbone Duelist. So Nicole could play out this Archangel, kill one of them, and then she has the ability to block the other one. That would mean taking another one toxic from the Sentry. Can Sarah find something to go with the Rot Priest? Oh, that's a Serum Snare. And that's got to be lethal.
I mean, I don't think there's blue though.
Oh, there's no blue. Okay. Yeah, the mana in this deck just annoys me so much. Mirex, a seed core just this is I think really honestly one of the core problems with Bant is that you do get these draws sometimes where you cannot cast your blue spells. And yeah, for Sarah, that really could have been lethal, is not lethal. Still though, Nicole at 7 poison, that is not a lot when you have a Rot Priest in hand.
It is not. I mean, the seed core can do some work, but
Right.
still, it is going to be a bit difficult. And here, I mean, Sarah can start developing the board even more with that Myrex,
Mm,
but it would be really nice to be able to draw something like a blue source,
right.
maybe.
Yeah, for sure. And Nicole is going to use the Topiary Stomper, gets another land, and I think she can also use a herd migration to get a land drop for the turn.
Yeah, and seven
Which,
is the magic number. Nicole really needs to get to that 7 mana so that this Topiary Stomper can also attack and block.
mm, right. Not just a, not just be part of the the scenery, as it were.
Exactly, and we see exactly that the Earth Migration is going to get that 7th land, which is
Yeah,
going to be
Nicole.
crucial.
Yeah, here it is, the 7th land from herd migration. Excellent basic land choice for Nicole, by the way. Great taste.
Yeah, and things actually are looking pretty good here for Nicole. And Sarah needs to draw something that can get her out of this spot. I mean,
Oh,
that's one way. It's not enough yet, but it does
well,
help.
okay. Wait, is it not enough? Because you can the Topiary Stomper is a 3 or less, right? So Sarah can return Topiary Stomper, proliferate, get an extra poison onto Nicole. Isn't this just lethal?
Oh, there's also the proliferate part of it. You're right.
Yeah. That's what's so crazy about this serum snap. You getting to use it on a Topiary Stomper and
Yep,
Nicole
this is going
cannot
to
do
be it.
anything.
No. And once again, I mean, Nicole dying at 17 life. But that's the
Yeah.
magic of this deck. Yeah, and the magic of proliferate.
Wow. I think a lot of people were surprised that poison counters, came back into standard, but really I think they've done quite a good job of balancing it. And people I know lots of people hate playing against it. I don't feel great when I die to poison, but I think it definitely does add a dimension to standard that we haven't seen for a while and is pretty sweet.
Yeah, and I think with these standard that we are experienced, there is so much power. Toxic actually ends up not being too overpowered. Where in other standard formats that were maybe shorter, that had less powerful creatures, that could be the case. But with Children's around, Atraxas, toxic is the least of the concerns.
Yeah, I want to quickly give a shout out to Nicole's sideboarding there because I think she actually went down a copy of Sunfall in favor of bringing in the Chrome Host Seed Sharks, the cheaper removal spells, the long goodbyes, even 2 copies of the Tranquil Throwback, which can come in and destroy an artifact or enchantment, which a lot of um, these mites are. And I think that just really goes to show you how much she's prepared for this format. Like I would not have in a million years thought it would be right to take Sunfall out, but I could totally see why she made that decision.
Yeah, especially knowing that in the sideboard we have these strengthful strokes on Sarah's side, spell pierce, a lot of things that
Mm.
for super cheap are able to counter that sunfall and other expensive spells. So I really like the decision of going with um, other cards.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just having a look at these keeps. I mean, both players had kind of terrible two landers. Uh, Sarah sent hers back. Nicole kept hers. going to rely on this herd migration a little bit. And Sarah England kind of went from this hand with only green mana and blue spells to a hand with no green mana, but also no green spells.
But that's the great thing about the domain deck. Now is able to Nicole can just get a land with the migration, and then there's the Stomper. So from suddenly a 2 land hand, it can quickly become into just ramping anyway.
Yeah, for sure. And there it
Ooh, and
is.
that's great.
Yeah, as far as headquarters, a nice white source for Nicole to cast some of these double white spells she has in hand. Hard Migration can get another planes. And it does seem like this one is playing out a little bit better if you're in Nicole's seat.
Yeah, and I really like how Nicole has been playing. And I'm not sure what the score is for Nicole this season, but I'm really, really happy to see her play so well. And I'm really impressed. As you said, the sideboard choices and everything.
Yeah, for sure. Nicole on 3-2 coming into this week. Sarah England on 4-1. So both players very much battling for those slots. Just to give people an idea, 5-2 we think generally is safe to make it on under the wildcard system. There are some number of 4-3s that will make it. It's unclear how many at this point. So for the 4-3s, it's a sweat, and then the 5-2s I think have a pretty uh, solid idea that they're gonna be good for the playoffs.
Which is really nice because it feels sometimes bad that go 5-2, such a great score, and not make it. So it is a good opportunity for these players that did so well in their division to be able to shine through and still have a chance.
For sure. And Sarah, with the mites here, charge of the mites in the end step, making those 2 instant speed mites, and then gets to untap, play Skrelv, experimental augury available, as well as a crawling chorus. And Nicole, with the Tophery Stumper, that still can't quite get in, but Archangel of Wrath is looking really nice.
It is looking really nice. And the Cavern of Souls, I don't think it says Angel, so it can be countered. So Nicole might be afraid of something like a Disdainful Stroke. This temporary lockdown does play around Spell Pierce.
Yeah, for sure. There's a nice temporary lockdown here for Nicole. And Sarah's going to use the time to get that experimental augury going.
And yeah,
Gets the killer
unfortunately, that
through.
Spell Pierce is not going to do much.
Yeah, Spell Pierce doesn't do a lot. March of Swirling Mist. Look at this. Sarah's actually going to pitch Spell Pierce to March of Swirling Mist in order to save 2 creatures. That's pretty sweet.
That is pretty sweet, realizing at that point that the Spell Pierce is not going to do much. And that Nicole is kind of playing around it.
Yeah, just being able to adapt to the changing situations, always a mark of a great player. And Sarah gets in for another 2 poison. And Nicole, with half of her remaining available poison counters. Oh, and that's temporary lockdown getting countered by Bring the Ending because Nicole was at Corrupted. Wow.
And we see how strong this is. This deck has been powerful over and over again. That Skrelv can start doing some magic as well. Being able to give protection to one of the mites and start going for more. And 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10. Oh, and there's a Sunfall for Lady of the Crease, but Smart of Swirling Mist is in hand. That can save 2 things.
That is true, and that is really important.
Oh, I love this play from Lady of the Crease.
Yeah, great play. Now having access to 2 blockers as well.
Yeah. Gonna target the Skrelv and the Mite.
And here this March needs to come through to help these Phyrexians.
Wow. Okay, that's a Mirrex off the top for Sarah. So that is going to be some mites later, but not necessarily right now. This Skrelv, by the way, has been clinging on by the tips of its spindly little claws survived multiple sweeper effects and is just doing so much work for Sarah, giving these mites extra toxic plus protection. But of course, giving a protection from white does means that the Topiary Stomper can still block it.
Yeah, so it's not enough, even with that land that can pump it a bit, it's not enough. And
Oh, hello.
Tishana Timebinder can counter a poison counter.
That's true. That's very, very true indeed. And Lady of the Crease is going to be thinking, like, at what point do you start attacking?
Yeah, it's a difficult decision. The Sunfall also seems pretty tempting, but then we have Myrex. We can see something like a Sunfall, and in response to Myrex, Tishana Steinbinder on the trigger, um,
Mm.
attacking first.
Yeah, if that's the plan, then certainly Nicole will want to be sending.
And I think that Nicole here deciding not to go with that plan, dealing 4 with Vigilance, which, I mean, slowly but surely Sarah down is going to be down to 8.
Yeah, and Sarah does have to make some blocks here, but Crawling Chorus just perfect for that. Oh, but Nicole can stifle the chorus trigger, perhaps.
Yeah, or the Myrex trigger, one of the two. And that can be really
Right.
helpful.
You're right. Saving it for the land that can kind of do this repeatedly, that makes a lot of sense.
It can also
Oh,
be just it's a blocker.
right. Like
You're
a
not
surprise
expecting,
blocker.
it's a surprise blocker. Sarah needs to attack with everything, then suddenly 3 things are blocking.
So let's see what happens here. Sarah needs to attack with everything, and that means that this Skrelv can't activate at instant speed.
Yeah, so we see the Tishana Binder now. It does not counter an ability, but
Mhm.
it does block pretty well.
That's true.
And I think here Nicole recognizing that if that by Tishana Binder would counter an ability, then probably Sarah would not attack. And that
Mm,
would gain time to get cards like Rod Priest with
right,
some March, for example, and
right,
some
and
other
that's like
threats.
yeah, and then you're kind of in a tough spot. But Sarah does get to activate the seed core that Tishana Sidebinder is trading with the might, and Sarah passes the turn back, gonna just hold up the Murex activation. Nicole has played this very, very fastidiously. Is gonna get to attack for a bunch here, and Sarah's on a 2-turn clock.
These Murex do not block. These mites do not block, and
Mm-mm.
things will start to get a bit tight. And now it's the decision because although I'm sure,
Oh,
yeah, I think Nicole here is very debating. Can I afford to attack with both?
oh, it's such a big decision. The
It,
Stomper, that has vigilance. That can definitely attack. But the Angel?
it, it is really tempting because it makes you from a 2-turn clock to a 3-turn clock. Because if now Nicole attacks with the 4/4, then 7 damage next turn is not enough.
Right,
That's 11 damage. So
right,
this makes the difference between a 2 and a 3-turn clock.
right. And Nicole really has to think, like, what are the chances that Sarah does, okay, I'm just going to Mirrex end step, untap, play an Annex Sentry, take the Stomper off the battlefield, and go for lethal. So I cannot blame Nicole for taking her time to think about this one. I'm sure there must be a mathematically correct decision here. I am not equipped with the mental faculties to tell you what that is. Do you have an idea, Filipa? What might be more likely?
Well, sometimes the most mathematical and likely is not even relevant. It is all depending on what the top deck is going to be. I mean, it can be mathematically correct here for Nicole to attack with both, and still the top deck being that Sentry, and
Right.
then Nicole just feeling, oh, I should not have done it.
Mm.
I mean, this approach is a bit more cautious.
Yeah, and it does look like it might work out here though for Nicole. Scrolls hive the draw for Sarah, and that does provide a lot of long-term advantage. But it does, I guess, also give all of these creatures lifelink. Could that be
It could be relevant, but not at this moment because it does give lifelink, but at the same time, you cannot block. So it might be relevant if Nicole only attacks with the Stomper. It really depends whether Nicole decides to attack here with the Angel as well or no.
relevant? Oh, Tranquil Frillback was the find for Nicole off that cycled Sparrow's headquarters, and that does have the ability when it comes down. You can pay green, destroy target artifact or enchantment, and that is going to take away the last blocker on Sarah's side. So it looks very much, Filipa, like Nicole has this one in the bag. Tranquil Frillback
I,
coming
I,
down.
I think Skrelv cannot block either, right?
Oh,
Or
can Scrub not block?
no, and I think this is only 7 damage, so that's the thing. I mean, I'm thinking, but let me check because sometimes,
Oh yeah,
yeah, he
you're
cannot
right.
block.
Right. I was in my mind. I was like, Skrelv is gonna jump in front of this Topiary Stomper, etc., etc. But you're so right, Felipe. It could not have blocked anyway.
It's still great. Nonetheless, it's still great.
Still great. Great draw. Adds another blocker to the battlefield. And Nicole's gonna keep going slow and steady. Gets in for another 4, and Sarah really needs to find something here. Activates Mirex. What's it gonna be? Oh my goodness. That is much of the swelling miss.
That is good enough.
Oh my goodness, that is going to be good enough. Phase out those 3 blockers, and for Nicole, it's heartbreak in game number 2. That's going to be the match going to Sarah on Bant Toxic. And honestly, Felipa, you have to feel for Nicole a little bit. She thought so hard about that decision. Do I go for the 2-turn kill in this spot? And ultimately, things didn't work out her way. But congratulations to Sarah England walking away from this one, and I believe that takes Sarah to 5-1, which I think should be locking Sarah for the playoffs. So that's great stuff there from Sarah.
Congratulations. I really like seeing both players play here. I think both played really well. And about Nicole's decision there to not go for the 2 turns, at the same time, the top deck could have been an Accentary and just finish the game right there if Nicole did decide to attack with both. So I do not condemn the decision to be more cautious there. I think it was in the end a very good decision. But like everything, sometimes you have a good decision and things just don't pay out, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anyone could really have faulted Nicole for that decision. But it is just one of those moments where, she's going to be thinking about it. Sarah's going to be thinking about it. But ultimately, great play from both players. And like you say, like, I really like that. I think we got to see a lot of the thought processes for both of them, like the way that they considered things. I'm thinking also about Sarah and the way she played and saving Skrull from those temporary lockdowns multiple times. Just a lot of back and forth. Great play from both players.
Yeah, I really enjoy it, and I'm really enjoying to see how the aggro decks in standard now cannot just be aggro because of so many board wipes. They have to rely on an alternative win con. Here we see this deck that has the poison counters. We saw the Bant Convoke that has just refilling of the board with the knight, and we also see, for example, mono red that has burn spells in case everything gets board wiped. So I'm really enjoying to seeing the standard, and I really like the games that we saw
Yeah,
today.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with you, Filipa. I mean, I am a control player at heart, but I love a healthy format. I love seeing this diversity of decks. And it's nice to have like that old, like in an anime when you kind of want your rival to also grow because then you get like the excellent matches, you get the kind of to and fro that we see. And that's how I think these decks are playing out in standard. Great format, great players. Felipe, any last thoughts on week number 6?
No, I just have to say that I really appreciate how the VML is growing and the players that we see season after season getting better and better. And we were talking kind of off stream before saying how proud you were of so many VML competitors doing well in the Pro Tour. And that goes to show we see these players starting testing teams and starting getting more serious. And it does goes to show that everyone can enjoy Magic and can become good at Magic. And places like VML are very important to do that. And I'm really
Yeah,
proud of the players.
yeah, absolutely, Felipe. Couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the Pro Tour Chicago was, I think, really a breakthrough moment for the cohort of players that we've been trying to develop. And obviously, their successes are their own. They're fantastic people, great individuals, incredible minds. But just getting to see them do so well, and not only in the PT, right? Like in the Standard Open, in the Modern Secret Lair event, I believe the finals was also split by a VML. So just great stuff all around from the players. Really happy to see that what we're doing here is, seeing some effects in the world at large, and hopefully more to come from these fantastic people that are incubated in our community. Um, that was a terrible incubate token joke that I just did not think through even slightly.
I
But
I love it. Bring all the magic puns. I love it.
all right, that's going to do it from week number 6 here at the VML. I've been Haiyue. Thank you so much for joining, Filipa. Thank you to Phoebe, our awesome producer, our sponsors, Wizards of the Coast, and of course to all of our players and viewers out there. Any last thoughts for the evening, Filipa?
Just that I'm really excited to watch how the week 7 is going to develop, and I'm just very excited. This last week is going to be very, very, very stressful for many of the players that are in between making it or not. So just stay calm and advice for our players, stay hydrated, and everything is going to work out.
Right. I also, Felipe, I hope that you can follow your own advice. And of course, we wish you the best for your match as well. Thank you so much, my friends. Thanks for joining us. We are back here next week, same time, Friday, 6 p.m. Pacific. Join us for coverage of week number 7 and find out who is going to be going to the playoffs here in season 11 of the VML. We'll see you next week.